started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Danielle Fuentes Morgan, and I am the Associate Director for the Center for the Arts and Humanities, and it is my pleasure to introduce our event today. Very quickly, the Center for the Arts and Humanities at Santa Clara University is an organization that promotes collaboration and learning in the arts and humanities. And we're very excited to host this event, this excellent event, which is a conversation between Joy Priest and Maya Jeffra, and Maya is one of our Center for Arts and Humanities faculty fellows. I'm going to introduce Maya and then let them take it away. Maya is the author of 4 books, most recently The Violence Almanac, which was a finalist for several awards, including the Grace Paley and Robert C. Jones Book Prizes, and the novel American Gospel, which is a finalist for the PEN Hemingway Award, and is co-editor of the anthology Home is Where You Queer Your Heart, where it can be seen in Story Quarterly, Prairie Schooner, the North American Review, Anomaly, Diagram, and many others. Maya is also the co-founder of the Whitting Award-winning queer and trans literary collaborative Foglifter Press, and teaches writing and cultural studies at Santa Clara University, and we are very fortunate for that. So I'd like to introduce Maya and then take it away.
I guess I'm going to use it. Whoa.
Wow.
Do I need this?
I think because they're recording.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm terrible with a mic. I always want to eat it. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. So as you know, thank you, Danielle. I'm one of the fellows for the Center for the Arts and Humanities this year. And my project, just to give you a little context as to why we're even here today, is a novel that I'm composing right now that's made up of ethnographic interviews set in various parts of Appalachia. My mom's side of the family is Scot-Irish Appalachia, folk from Bristol, Tennessee, and northern Alabama. Because my father was a Marine. And of course I had always loved the flavor of the people, what we will talk about probably a little bit, the musicality of the interaction between books. I never really thought I was going to write about it. I am a writer of place. I have a book set in Baltimore. I have a book set in very specifically, but I never thought I was going to write about Appalachia. But then after the 2016 election, I found out that my entire family had voted for Trump. And I was curious about that because they're all very poor Appalachia folk. And I could not negotiate why they thought Trump's policies would be of interest to them. And so that curiosity led me to just start conducting interviews. But then from there, much like all research, it deviated wildly. And I became more interested in the way that the young men in my family had been socialized. And now the book primarily is about youth. It's kind of a Bildungsroman, even though it's very much about the place, a trailer park in this part of northeastern Alabama. But what excites me about today is thinking not only about kind of this sociopolitical subject matter of my novel, but more how the place is beginning to inform the prose and very much the kind of poetics that are developing in my book. And when I was asked to host an event for the CAH, I immediately thought of Joy, because I read, I've known Joy for, I don't know, 6 years?
I don't even remember how we met.
I don't either.
I don't even remember how we met.
We probably shouldn't share that in public.
Probably not.
Right.
Who knows?
But I was familiar with Joy's work, and then she came out with Horsepower, which won the Donald Hall Prize, selected by Natasha Trethewey, and I was blown away by what I thought was this powerful example of place-informed poetry, even though it's quite narrative. But the musicality in it, the way the language kind of juxtaposes to the meaning, it's one of my favorite collections of poetry in the contemporary age. I'm just going to be honest. So I'm fangirling over here. And, since Joy has also edited an anthology called Once a City Said, which is all about Louisville, Kentucky poets. And I knew that she would be a really interesting kind of addition to discuss, okay, what is this emergence of poetics that I'm feeling in my prose? How does it even potentially relate to anything that Joy is doing? Maybe it doesn't. And I thought that broad spectrum of interest might be a great place for us to just make some connections and conversations. This is going to be very much an extemporaneous conversation between us, and we highly invite you all, if you have any questions, comments, moments that you just want to exclaim, you are welcome to do so, okay? Because we're here to just maybe get to learn something about, what is Appalachian poetics? And what does a poetics of place mean at all? And that might be very different, in our purviews and maybe even yours. Okay? Sound good?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to start just asking Joy some foundational questions. What is your connection to Appalachia?
Yeah, actually, let me stand back up. Sorry, I'm going to be moving around a lot because I don't think there's a remote. Right. My initial awareness and connection to Appalachia is through my literary lineage, through the poets that trained me, through the writers that trained me, and also educated me about this place that I was like writing in the context of. And so I have just a couple of visual things. When I went to the University of Kentucky. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. And so we'll talk about what my connection is to Appalachia. But Louisville, there's like 2 cities in Kentucky, Louisville, Lexington. If you call Lexington a city, I think it's like a big town. But, and University of Kentucky is the, flagship institution of the state. Mostly people know the Kentucky Wildcats. But it's an agricultural land grant institution. So if you want to go to like a good school in Kentucky, you go to University of Kentucky. So I wanted to be a veterinarian. But I was always a writer since I was a little girl. And so eventually I gravitated to the writers. And I was a features editor at the school paper. I was the features editor. And so I was doing the budget one night. And I noticed I learned that one of our English professors was up for the National Book Award. This was in 2011. And I said, oh my goodness, like she could win it. And so I stayed up that night in the newsroom to watch the National Book Awards. And sure enough, Nikki Finney won the National Book Award. And so, I was immediately enamored with her because she looked like me. And I was like, who is this person? The speech that she gave, John Lithgow, the host at the time, said that was the best speech for anything I've ever heard in my life. So it was just like immediately this sort of mystery around her, and like I had to talk to her, and I had to, So I ended up interviewing her, and then the next semester I was president of National Association of Black Journalists, and Frank X. Walker was the advisor for that organization. And after a meeting one night, I said, I write poems, and he said, well, let me see some. And I was like, all right. I didn't think he was going to read them, but I brought a whole folder of work. And he went back and read them, and he came back and he said, you have something to say, but you need some craft classes. So the next semester, I signed up for all of the writing classes that I could take. And so I took fiction with Nikki Finney, and I took poetry with Frank X. Walker. And Frank is the founder. He's one of the co-founders of the Afrolachian Poets. And this is a group that started on the campus of University of Kentucky in 1991. So this was 1991, 2001, 20 years later that I'm like in their class. And him and Nikki and Crystal Wilkinson are still teaching at this school. So they all became my teachers. They started taking me to Hindman, Kentucky, which is in eastern Kentucky, like eastern coal mining kind of places in the Appalachian Mountains, where there's this historic literary community where they hold the Appalachian Writers Workshop every summer. And there was this documentary called, it's still up, I think, The Co-Black Voices, about the Afrolachian poets. And I would like watch it religiously, like I was like fangirling, And so really my understanding of Appalachia came through my literary education as a Kentuckian. And I guess the final thing I would say is they're really serious about educating not only us when we get inducted, but like, it's kind of like any reading we do. We're educating you about the region, which is, a mountain region just like the Rockies, except it has its own unique culture that's grown up around it. But it's a huge region. It goes from New York to Mississippi. And the Appalachian Poets was something that Frank founded to disrupt this notion that the region is racially homogenous, that there isn't any Black people or Latino people or Indigenous people living there anymore, but also to just, archive the culture of the region. Oh, well, let me just say, when you get inducted, sorry, it's a long intro. When you get inducted, you have to explain your connection to Appalachia. And my grandparents, my family is originally from northern Alabama, Appalachian, Alabama. So that's kind of what I wrote about in the connection that I sort of wrote into when I was working immediately with this collective.
And so if any of you are unfamiliar with the Afrolachian Poets, I highly recommend you read some of them. Because even when I was in university in Atlanta, that's when I started discovering some of these writers. And I didn't make the connection to the region so much as just something bound me to the writing itself. It was some of the most exciting poetry that I was reading at the time. And maybe because of the proximity, studying in Atlanta and really interested in Southern literature in general. But there was something that grabbed me, and I couldn't have articulated it then. It just was there. And obviously, the region is huge. So right away, we have to ask the question, because I'm curious what you think about this. Why don't we start with it being a two-part question? First, what characteristics of Appalachian literature do you feel are known versus what you think it actually is?
The characteristics I think are known. And this will connect too to why I ended up doing this Louisville anthology, because I think like in the American imagination, we have these sort of stereotypes that we know about a place, and a lot of what literature does is really, you know, texturize a place in a nuanced way. So the things that I think are known, oh my gosh, that's, can I say, you know, like, this, I mean, as a Kentuckian, the things I hear as a Kentuckian about Kentuckians, like backwoods, hillbilly, illiterate, barefoot, um, everybody voted for Trump, which I want to address that. About the literature specifically, I mean, that it's like literature of place, I think is something that feels known, but I like to complicate that too. So, and then the second, did you ask the second part?
Mhm.
The second part being what was the second part again?
What do you think the characteristic actually is?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a huge connection to the land. So there's a lot of like sort of environmentalism and attention to ecology, a lot of indigenous history. Indigenous history is very important, I think, to writers in Appalachia. I would say, you know, setting, place, the music of colloquial speech. I made a slide for this too. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Maybe I didn't make one. Oh yeah. Yeah, like plays, connection to the land, colloquial speech, music, narrative, family, culture, labor, politics, ecology. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned place. Because this is fascinating. We're going to go beyond just Appalachia with this question because, I mean, everyone says that, right? Oh, it's a Appalachian literature or Appalachian poetics. Oh, it's a literature of place, and certainly we can think about that, right? You we have read plenty of work that somehow the place informs the poetics. You know, Ken Harif, Plain Song, right? Very much the the middle of the country where you have giant horizons and the language itself almost reflects that kind of long horizon, long spaces. The blowing of the grasses, right? You can almost feel it in the sentences themselves, right? Um, and a lot of people would say that's a literature of place. So I don't know. What does that mean to you?
I don't know. I'm endlessly baffled. Like when Horsepower came out, that's what everyone, you're a writer of place. It's a book of place. And I was like, what does that mean? Because it's not like a craft element, like, oh, you're a writer of the line, or, you're a writer of, you're like Nathaniel Mackey, it's music. It's so like what makes up place is kind of like always what I'm trying to figure out. Is it just setting? Is it narratives that come out of a place? The flora and fauna, the sensory complex of a place, right? I don't know. I like think about it a lot, and I've really been enamored recently with this concept of literary mapping because someone did a review of Horsepower and they like mapped it on, they like mapped the poems onto a Google map, and I was like, okay, what can I understand about what people mean by this book is a book of place from this literary map? And it's just that the book, the sequence of poems was narrative. It was a story that was told in a specific place, and it had its landmarks and its sayings and its syntax, the way people talk. And yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
So, I mean, my initial response is it's a rhythm. So, just from what I've noticed in the way I read or the way I've written my own work, because I'm also accused of being a writer of place. And so I had to contend with that question too. It's like, well, okay, because I'm setting it. I mean, don't we all, when we write, don't we all have location involved? Because we know how much it informs who we are, the experiences that we have. I mean, we can't have a narrative without moving through time and space, right? So that always felt a little like remedial in some way to me, like or overly fundamental. Why identify it? But then I was. Do you know Arisa White, the poet?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was at my book launch in Seattle with Arisa White, and she had read American Gospel, which is set in Baltimore, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, one of your characters is so hip hop," and I was like, "What?" Now that kind of makes sense because some of you know I originally went to college for hip hop dance, but I was like, "What are you talking about? What? How is this character hip hop?" And then I went back and read some of it, and I realized, oh my goodness, it is. It's da 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 da. It the downbeat is emphasized in almost all of the cadence of the lines, especially when this character is not speaking, when the character is narrating. And so then I just kind of entertained this idea. I'm glad you asked this question. It just kind of popped in my head. And then I looked at some of the work that I did in the Violence Almanac, which is all California based. And I noticed that I have a character who's set in San Francisco, and it's absolutely disco. It is that the hi-hat, that kind of backbeat with the hi-hat. It's in there. And so I'm trying to summon that in some way with the narration of this new novel with Appalachia. But I'm having a little bit of a harder time with it, even though I find it, at least in the characters that I've encountered, just being in the place, it is the most musical place I've ever been in the United States. At least the parts of like East Tennessee and Northern Alabama that I'm mostly pulling from. And I feel like, if anything, I can't put my finger on it. Can you help me with that? What is that music?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because, like I was saying, like I was thinking of places in terms of mode, image, but not like music or the line, And you're a prose writer mostly, so I think that like when someone says like, oh, a poet, there can be poets that don't have a location. There's like that elliptical, ephemeral poetry, but I'm really interested in the idea that the cadence of a place can inform like the cadence of the syntax in your writing. And I'm thinking about how when I was writing Horsepower, I had to call my people and like I would just talk to them and interview them a lot. I was like, I'm writing a poem about something. It's like, what happened when Billy did that thing, and just, listening to my mom but also I had Valerie June's album on when I was writing a lot, which is like the epigraph to the book. I don't know.
Will you read a poem from Horsepower, and just so that maybe we can pick up on something? Is that possible?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Pull it out. And maybe, can we all pay attention to this? Like, I don't know, any sense that we get in the rhythms and the cadence. This is off the cuff, so Joy doesn't even know that we're necessarily doing this, but I mean, that, I don't know, it could be interesting, just you all here listening to it. What kind of rhythm do you pick up?
West.
Ooh. Well, I'm prone to Aunt Louise, but also I love American Honey.
I could do Aunt Louise. That's kind of like set in actually in Appalachia too. I was thinking of the payphone or quilting frames.
Ooh. Go. Yeah. Golden frames.
All right, so quilting frames. Quilting frames was what they called Charlie's mule because its bones were like a rack its skin hung over. The mule had more sense than he did taking his drunk ass home every day, my grandmother says on the phone from Cleveland, a long way from Alabama now. She says when they'd been sewing for a while and the quilt had grown heavy as an animal's coat, they would throw it over a wooden frame to keep it upright. Says she and the other women would sit on the porch same time every evening to see Charlie ride by on his way in from town, Lansville, where he'd go like all the other men after 13 hours in the field. He'd be stone drunk and thrown over the back of that damn mule, she says, which knew its way home and how to hold up a work thing.
I picked up on one. I don't know. Did they feel some kind of like tangible rhythm in that?
I don't know about rhythm so much, but like maybe this is me projecting onto it, but like I love bluegrass music. And so like I just feel like the pluckiness of strings, like with the region.
Pluck, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got dun 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 coming through. It's true. It's a very plucky syntax, right? But it's kind of like a joined together. There'll be something languid and then ding 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 ding. Everyone's looking at us strange.
Just amusing.
You want to do another?
Were you going to read something?
I mean, and we see if there's any relationship?
Yeah.
All right. So this is from the book in progress, and it's describing the trailer park. So I don't know. Let's see if we see any relationship. Misty Meadows was a community as far as I reckon. We had single wides and double wides, trailers that had been shingled since Eisenhower, and a couple that rolled into the vacant lots just last year. It wasn't too big, with one main road running through the center and then two roads curving around the center like a cow flank. I guess if you saw it from the sky, Misty Meadows Trailer Park would be shaped like a fat almond or a peach seed. And the woods wrapped all round it, all the way to the highway on one side and Old Chapel Road on the other, though I don't know which Old Chapel the road refers to, because that implies some kind of presence with them Catholics, and we're all Christian in these parts. We a people of pulpits and pastors, not chapels. What I do know, the trailer park is the only real deal on the road for miles, save a billboard saving souls here and there, a humble lawn, the lumber yard, Eddie's La Store, and not a chapel per se for anywhere. People were right nice if they chatted with you at all. Some people, even those that had lived there for decades, really kept to themselves, went to work, raised their kids, church on Sundays. Maybe they come to the July 4th barbecue. Others now, Misty Meadows for them was everything they knew. Their cut the cord and meet their maker. They heard what was happening to people in the park before the people in the park knew it was happening to them. That was mostly the gray ladies, what we called them, a foursome of ratty-haired crones that always chain-smoked together, usually in their small kitchens or on Nellie Henry's porch. It was a right nice porch, with begonias squeezed in all corners, a metal table and chairs in the middle like some English tea garden. The ladies had lived there for years, before the rest of us, I mean, stayed home to raise their kids, didn't ever work a job, even after the kids long gone, or living alone just a few trailers down, as was the case with Miss Deanne Riddle, being as ugly as a bucket full of armpits, bless her heart. Can you imagine a woman not working any kind of job in their whole life? This was 1989 for bejesus' sake. Billy and I would sneak a laugh then and now, just thinking about them. But then we'd always quiet down for an elephant second, stewing in envy until the coffee gone cold. Maybe that's all community is. Might that be a congregation, group of chain-smoking biddies, or a trailer park? Just a bunch of folks hanging on to one another like a hair in a biscuit.
maybe like a lot of dependent clauses treated as complete sentences in a way that that stacks like it stacks like the same musical notation like repetitiously on top of each other. That's what I guess is how I could describe it. Did you have thought?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's almost like it could be written in like list format.
Yes, list was a word that came.
Yeah, if you wanted to do it like that, but there's a way that it's written.
Yeah.
In a more sentence-like structure.
Yeah, so it made me think like, yes, list came to my mind too, and I was trying to think of how to translate that in poetic terms, but anaphora, it's anaphoric. And so it's like, what is the relationship there? Like, why speak in list? Why speaking of it's because it's not even just like a list of like in terms of subject, but in terms of sound, pattern of sound,
I wonder how that is related to the place.
And not to add on to it, but I think a lot, and especially with the book I'm writing right now, about how, I'm thinking a lot about which I'll read from tonight. The book I'm working on now is a lot of Black classical music stuff, but I'm thinking a lot about like Southern Black speech and how parataxis was something I noticed, but how like syllables are compressed together so that 4 might become 2, so on and so forth. Which I think is just also you could say about Southern accents in general, or rural accents in general, maybe. You hear my Kentucky won't let me pronounce that second R, rural. But it's like, what was that about? What is the economy about? Like, why did people need to clip stuff? Maybe to fit within the rhythm.
That also might have something to do with topography. Because if you think about it, if anyone's familiar with the South, you have the Piedmont, and then you have the hills, and then you have the Holler, right? The Piedmont is very languid, right? The accent is almost like the humidity in the summer. Everything is long. But in the Holler, it's beginning to sound like a banjo. Like, right? It's right. But then you'll have the right? You're looking at me funny, like that's
I'm
not.
I'm trying to recall like people I know, like and how they talk.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the listicle, right?
Yeah.
In the Piedmont.
The listicle, yeah.
Right.
What was your name? Luca?
Yeah.
Thanks, Luca. That was great. Yeah. I feel very affirmed because that's what I was thinking.
Okay. We'll move on from that kind of abstraction. So if you don't mind just talking about the anthology that you edited, because so what was it, 3 years ago? 2 years ago?
I don't know what happened the last 5 years.
I know.
Well, I started my PhD in 2020. The book came out the second month I was in my PhD. And then that was also, of course, the summer that there was protests for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was murdered in Louisville. So it was the first, I think maybe that I know of in my lifetime, there were any like actual disruptive protests in Louisville. So a lot of writers were reaching out to me because I was a journalist in Kentucky first, and I was a community writer. I went to all the open mics growing up and stuff like that. So, and I have this platform now at this point, and so a lot of people are reaching out to me, talking to different journalists about what's going on. But what I was hearing from the folks I was talking to was not reflected in the national sort of media narrative, about what was going on in Louisville, which is always the case. we got like Scott Jennings on CNN, but he, bless his heart. So, so like that happens a lot with places like Louisville or Appalachia. Like you get pundits talking about a place, but you don't have anyone from the actual place like explaining what's going on the ground. And so I thought, oh, okay, very a la James Baldwin, like the poets are the only people who know the truth about us. And maybe I should try to publish a folio of writers on the ground in Louisville. So I tweeted, and this is like, again, first semester PhD, would anyone like to do a folio of Louisville poets that are living in Louisville right now through what's going on? And Saraband Books, which is a national indie publisher, but was headquartered in Louisville in 1994. But until the founder was a director up until 2020, and then Kristen Miller took over. And before that, they didn't really publish Kentucky writers. It was very much a like, oh yeah, I'm from Kentucky, but I want to publish. I want to be recognized. I don't want to be recognized as a Kentucky publisher. But so Kristen Miller, the new publisher, reached out to me and said, "How about a whole anthology? Would you like to do a whole anthology?" And I said, why not? Which is totally insane because I was in my PhD and I had a book that Horsepower had just come out. So then I ended up spending my whole PhD also working on this anthology. But that's why I wanted to do it. And to be honest, like Kentucky, what are some things y'all know about Kentucky? Like if someone says Kentucky, it's okay if you don't know anything, but if you do, like what's the most prominent thing that comes to mind?
The color. Kentucky blue.
Kentucky blue, okay.
The Derby, like the horse racing.
The Derby, that's the big one, right?
Wendell
Berry, you just know stuff, so we're not going to count that. But Kentucky is known for horse racing, bourbon, and basketball, which is where that Kentucky blue comes from, and the bluegrass. But
coal mining.
But what was that?
Coal mining.
Coal mining. Yeah, I don't know if that's a huge sort of popular imagination knowledge, about Kentucky, but I would add literature to those three things. Like I think there's a huge literary legacy in Kentucky. Like Robert Penn Warren's from Kentucky, Hunter S. Thompson. Like there's so many there's such a long, serious writing legacy in Kentucky. And so but it's all like Eastern Kentucky, and there's been a lot of anthologies around that in Lexington, Kentucky. Because all the writers taught at UK, Gurney Norman, and but there's never been anything about Louisville writers. So I thought it was really important to publish an anthology of Louisville writers because that hadn't been done distinctively yet. And we got Muhammad Ali was a poet, me. So, but I knew there were a lot of writers, and so I was like, let's do that.
Can I probe that just a little bit deeper? Just what need did that fill in you? Because that's a big undertaking, right? I mean, we did an anthology at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And you were in mine. And it seems like at least we both did it because we felt, in my case, it was an anthology of queer writers who did not live in the queer centers. No one from Los Angeles, no one from New York, no one from San Francisco, no one from Miami, no one from Seattle. It was all, I can't say this word either, rural.
Adios.
Rural. Rural. There we go. It was all unorthodox queer spaces. And it came out the same year. So I was just curious, what personally, what need did it fill?
Aside from the things my therapist would diagnose, a need to be validated because I had a narcissistic parent. I don't know. But aside from that, I'm just trying to be honest too, my overproductivity is there's pathology behind it. But it relates to, again, my sort of literary training. There's a better word than training, but my introduction into being a writer as a vocation is like you have to you're a part of a community. So I think I was already thinking like my second project has to be something that brings my people along with me, because I don't come out of this like New York space where I had like writing parents or professor parents, or like I come out of a literary space that is about a collective, literary history and practice. And so it just felt like, that's the next thing I have to do, especially because I also felt a kind of guilt about leaving Kentucky, which actually Frank X, we just talked about this recently. He was kind of upset with me. I just left, and so like running, escaping, which is what Horsepower is about, and then kind of the book kind of doing much better than I expected, and feeling like I was like really becoming alienated from home. So it was like a way to do something with, this kind of new platform that I had.
I can relate to that. Yeah. There was almost a guilt for leaving. Largely because, it's kind of like something, maybe an American variation or iteration of brain drain, in a way, the way people kind of saw it.
Recently someone told me that, because I have this job that I just got at 35 years old, that I'm no longer working class. But, it's like, there's guilt. It's like, wow, just because when you're growing up in these spaces, you just hear like, you're gonna, like, everybody's encouraging you to do something great with your life, or you get a lot of like, there's a lot of community pride in you if you're doing well. But no one talks about when you like get to a place of like sort of perceptible success and this sort of guilt that you feel about it.
I definitely can resonate with that.
That has anything to do with what we're talking about.
You know what? Actually, it has everything to do with it, I think. Because the same, and maybe that's the reason why we still go back to the place. And it's our way of paying homage to it or to acknowledge it. Because it was the same. I was the first one to graduate go to college. One of the first to graduate high school. And my family they were very proud of me in this kind of abstract. But whenever I go home, back home, my name is Ma. It's just Ma. It's one syllable. And people, I'm inscrutable. They say things like fancy pants, like, oh, he's fancy pants is here.
There's a really lonely alienation that happens when you like get to some place like this, and you in some ways don't relate to anyone around you in this new place you're at, but then you also can't really go back and relate in the ways that you used to when you were a part of the place. Yeah,
maybe that's what we are, as poets and writers. We're kind of continuously in exile.
Yeah, a writer of place is like a very sad, exiled, sensitive person trying to connect back.
Perhaps. I see a hand.
What determines a place for you?
I think we're all struggling with that question. Can I reflect it back onto you first? What do you think it is?
I think it's community. I think it's a sense of home. And I think it's just somewhere you live, just like this big, I don't know, community.
Yeah, there's like definitely places within a place too.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think the conversation we were just having about I don't know, this identity you're able to achieve once you've had a certain time writing and a certain success in authorship or understanding of your own voice as an author, and not being able to relate to the kind of identity that you started out with. And I know you mentioned that it might not be related, but I think it definitely is, and it reminded me so much of the conversations I had about Zekala Saw's work, specifically American Indian stories, because she was so judged for pursuing further education from her own communities, and then when she was able to get to a point to publish those works, she went back to her roots and wrote about her childhood and those settings that were so familiar in the earlier stages of her life. And I think that's something as writers that we're all akin to doing, is just going back to that familiarity, and maybe even sometimes those places where we don't realize we need to heal still and cope and revisit those places. I think that's really special, and where we do a lot of personal work in our writing.
Are you looking for something?
No, I was just information.
Oh.
I don't know if I'm having thoughts because I was thinking, it's also because a place isn't really distinct to you until you leave it. I don't know if maybe I should say that in first person. Kentucky, I guess, wasn't really a distinct place to me until I left it. I didn't have that perspective. And so, I'm constantly writing about it. And I'm thinking too about this, the creator of this concept of the literary map, Frank D. Rashad, who's from Detroit, not Detroit, which is what they correct me all the time. People from Detroit, they're like, it's Detroit. I'm like, Detroit. Accent on the Troit, right? I'm also the one in prosody class that's like, this isn't real, because that's not where I accent the word, in that sentence. I'm just thinking about how recently, too, there's been a lot of conversations around, because of the election, this distinction between not working class and middle class, but college educated and non-college educated. Because to me, there's a lot of working class people that are college educated. And so now that distinction is being made, which I think is an important one, because the argument being made is that non-college educated people are alienated by the Democratic Party, right? And I'm like, when I hear that, I balk at it, but then I'm like, wait, well, I'm part of the educated demographic now, and so maybe I don't have that perspective anymore that I had before, which I was always. Obviously, have I been college educated longer than I wasn't at this point? I don't know. No, not yet, but close. So, what does that mean? In terms, I'm having, you feel guilt around that too. Am I inscrutable to the place I'm from?
Yeah, and it's making me
also writing about it though. Yeah.
Thinking about your question. I think what's popping up in my mind right now is that talk about a circle back is actually place. Maybe the thing that identifies place most is a shared language, a shared nomenclature. Because I think I've bounced around the country quite a bit now, and one of the places, or one of the ways I find home, is actually within the nomenclature of queer culture. We have a lexicon, and you can be in Toronto, or you can be in Bangkok, and you could be in Atlanta. And there is something that is similar, that it's almost like the nomenclature extends itself to all those places and becomes the actual way that we congregate and create a community. So it's not so much about the physical spaces that we've come from as much as it is the spaces that we're moving towards. And I don't know if maybe that's just the velocity of language and its ability to do that. But I don't know. That's my kind of loose formulation of your question, coming back to it, especially what Joy just said. I think that's where I would put it most.
I just pulled this poem up, which was published in I had it put up, this new literary journal out of the Hyman Settlement School called Untelling. But we did this, they had us do this thing where we went to James Steele's cabin, so a Kentucky writer, and pulled books out of his library and like pulled a stack of books, and then we had to write a poem using the spine of the books, the spine of the stack, in that order. But I was just thinking, because I was like, where, you said maybe all we have is language, like what defines a place is language. And I was like, where's that? I just read something about that. And I was like, oh, it's the line in my poem where I say like native to somewhere lost, native only to language now. You know, that is like what I still have in my connection to place, you know, which goes back to our discussion of language, rhythm, and syntax. So, yeah.
It's like the contours of the community, no matter where. Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed just kind of us meandering around like that, because we actually just made a discovery or did something circuitous. Yeah. Wisdom either way, perhaps. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts that you have, especially for Joy, since she is on loan from Pittsburgh at the moment?
Yeah, by the way, I live in Pittsburgh, which is in Appalachia, but nobody there would claim that at all. Okay.
I just had a quick question, I guess. In your works,
A mic coming around for you.
oh gosh, thank you. In the possible upcoming changes that we're going to expect, whether that's federal or on a state level, with schooling and possible access to books and certain authors and certain works, how are you expecting to work around that in your future work at Kentucky or other places, or in your personal writing?
Yeah, I love these questions. No, people are usually like, I'm just a writer. I don't have that answer, which I don't. I don't have an answer because I kind of have not, I feel like I haven't responded to what's happening yet. You know, I think part of being a writer too is like, what's happening yet? What has always been happening? I don't know. I feel like being a writer is like the way I live in the world, and it's a very like slow, like let me process what's happening and then think about, and then write to understand what I think about what's happening, you know, and then read it to acknowledge what I think I'm thinking about what is happening, you know, and so on. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I have any control, unfortunately, over, like, I don't, as an individual, I don't have any, I can't do any, I don't think Congress can do anything right now, apparently, but like, you know, I don't think I can do anything. So I haven't really, I mean, I'm just going to keep reading, writing, and teaching, you know? And a part of that anthology was about too, like, not just the media narratives, but the state actors in Kentucky and the mayor of Kentucky, who had this like tagline that was like, how do we operationalize compassion? What a dystopian fucking sentence. Like, like part of it too was like letting, like giving, not giving voices. I can't do that, but like giving people who had something to say, like a place just to say it in together, because like there was no forum to do that when the mayor was just speaking for everyone. And so it was kind of like, I think I wrote in like my NEA statement, like, I'm going to give them hell or something like that, you know? But yeah, just keep reading, writing, and teaching like we've always been doing.
Did you say oh my goodness.
Operationalize compassion. Yeah.
The mayor said that?
Yeah, he was an entrepreneur. And then he was elected as mayor. And that was like his platform tagline or whatever.
Oh, wow.
Just to tag on to that, I love being an editor, you know, during these moments. Even more than being a writer. The writing is for me, but the editor is I'm aware that I've emerged into a place of a different capacity now, and the fact that I have access to a community of writers and to publication processes. I'm working on a new anthology, and it's queer and trans humor, very specifically responding to the time, because my activism has changed. I don't know if I'm effectual in that way at all, but what I can do is dance in the face of pain and laugh in the face of pain. And I'm really inspired by Audrey Murray Brown, who she's kind of like an artivist, intergalactic love maker, thinker, wonderful human. And her idea of pleasure activism is where I'm going now, because I don't understand how to posit myself into a response that is going to be good for the people that I care about and feel that need the help the most. So I'm just gonna create a space for joy to be assembled. And I think humor, being subversive and smart, and really hella ass queer and trans is one of the best ways to do that.
That reminds me of like the new NEA guidelines. Did you see those? Did you have an NEA? Did you get an NEA? Okay, I was gonna say the NEA fellows. No, so this every other year, like the genre changes. So like every other year you apply to poetry, and then the other years are prose. And so this year's application is for prose, and they took down like one of the categories that was like, they felt was like too DEI, and now it's a patriotism project. So you have to apply as an NEA fellow with a patriotic project. Luca's face. Which is like, I mean, it's scary, like, but a lot of the writers have been, like, a lot of us have been talking about it, and a lot of people are saying, oh, I'm going to apply with a satire or a parody or something, and they're not going to fucking know the difference, And, it just makes me think of things like, again, that I'm working on in the new book, which is like, what are ways in the past that we have sort of created art in these covert ways, like spirituals, or like what I've been thinking through in terms of the economy of speech and opacity, like someone not being inscrutable to the right people instead of your people, right? So write a satire.
Yeah. Let's find a way to use their money and then reflect it back on to the people that need it most. There's always a way, right? I think we're at time. I just want to thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you. Ma. Joy.
Actually, my people come. Joy Marie.
Thank you all for being here.